A poor girl used the car window as a mirror to fix her bra, and the millionaire seeing her fell in love at first sight. Before we begin the story, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Let's dive into the story together. New York mornings weren't known for their warmth, and today's sky looked like someone had tried to erase the sun with a dirty rag. Gray, smeared, undecided. It matched Alice Park's mood perfectly. She was late. Not fashionably late. Not, I'll charm my way out of it, late. She was full throttle. Oh no, I just ended my career before it started kind of late. Her heart pounded as she darted towards the building, 30 floors of glass and intimidation looming above her. Her blouse had chosen chaos, crinkled and crumpled like she'd slept in it, which, to be clear, she hadn't. Her hair looked like it had been in a minor scuffle with the wind and lost. The folder in her hand was barely holding itself together, just like the rest of her. She just needed a mirror. 10 seconds. A quick fix. One miracle, small or medium-sized. Then she saw it. A sleek, black sedan parked right outside the entrance, windows tinted to a high-gloss sheen, reflecting her image like a luxury department store display. God had heard her. Without thinking, because thinking clearly wasn't on the menu that morning, she leaned in close. One tug to adjust her bra strap through her blouse, one swipe of emergency lip gloss, and a semi-confident smile at her reflection, like she hadn't just committed a crime against dignity on a public sidewalk. Then came the sound. A low, subtle whirring. The window was rolling down. Alice blinked. Inside the car was a man. Calm, collected, tailored within an inch of his life. He looked like someone who scheduled his smiles 5 days in advance. His face didn't change, barely a flicker, but one brow lifted ever so slightly, like he couldn't decide whether he was witnessing performance art or a breakdown in real time. Need a professional-grade mirror? He asked, voice smooth as silk with just a sprinkle of sarcasm. Alice froze. For one horrifying second, she forgot how to be a person. Her dignity packed up and left. Her lungs filed for early retirement. And yet, somehow, words found their way out. "If you happen to see my dignity lying around out here," she said with a perfectly straight face, "would you be a dear and pick it up for me?" For a split second, nothing. Then, there it was. A chuckle. Quiet, brief, but real. The man didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Alice, cheeks blazing, spun around and marched toward the building like she meant it, head high, back stiff, and praying, begging the universe for mercy. "Please don't let him be my future boss," she whispered under her breath. "Please don't let me be that unlucky." Inside, the lobby smelled like money and disinfectant. Everything was shiny. Everyone looked like they ironed their lives before showing up. Alice tried to blend in, which would have worked better if her folder wasn't falling apart and her pulse wasn't thudding at 120 beats per minute. She checked in, took the elevator, rehearsed her answers for the 50th time. Told herself she could pull this off. Told herself a lot of things, actually. What she didn't know, and truly wasn't ready to process, was that the man in the car was Nicholas Avery, CEO of New Gen Technologies, a man who didn't blink at million-dollar deals but once shut down a pitch because the font on the presentation was hostile. He was precise, efficient, practically allergic to awkwardness, and in exactly 15 minutes, he would be sitting across from Alice Park, the same girl who used his car as a makeup mirror, the same girl who adjusted her bra in public, the same girl who cracked a joke instead of pretending it didn't happen. He wouldn't realize it yet, but that brief, ridiculous, unfiltered moment had just thrown his perfectly curated world off axis, because Alice Park wasn't like the others, and he wasn't ready for a woman who came with bad timing, excellent nerve, and eventually a nickname involving lettuce. but that part's coming later. The room felt like it had been designed to intimidate. Cool tones, minimalist furniture, a faint smell of overachievers and corporate polish. Alice sat upright in the stiff chair, legs crossed too tightly, folder clutched like it held her entire self-worth, which, at the moment, it kind of did. Her eyes darted to the clock. 2 minutes past the scheduled time. The silence in the room felt judgmental, like even the air knew she didn't belong. Then the door opened, and every molecule of oxygen in her lungs fled the scene. Nicholas Avery stepped in. Crisp, silent, impossibly composed. The same man whose car window she had just used as a personal mirror/wardrobe adjustment center. He didn't flinch when their eyes met. No raised brow, no sarcastic smile. Just a calm, unreadable face, like the moment earlier was something he cataloged, not something he judged. He took his seat opposite her, set down a slim black tablet, and said, matter-of-factly, "Well, we meet again." Alice opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "You're the CEO?" Nicholas didn't even glance up. "And you're the woman who uses luxury sedans as prep stations. Bold move." There was nothing cruel in his tone, just that dry, clinical calm, like he was delivering weather updates with a side of quiet mockery. Alice, red to the ears, exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Okay. In my defense, the window was spotless. I assumed no one was home." She gave a tiny shrug, the kind you give when your soul has already left your body and embarrassment is the only thing keeping you standing. And somehow, unbelievably, he smirked. Not a full smile, just the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth, like amusement had knocked but wasn't quite invited in. The ice broke. What followed wasn't an interview. Not really. Alice didn't flip through her mental list of strengths. She didn't mask her nerves behind buzzwords or pretend to be the best version of herself. She just talked. "I didn't go to college on a scholarship," she said. "I waited tables. I taught myself graphic design using YouTube tutorials and a glitchy laptop that ran hot every time I opened more than 2 tabs." Nicholas listened. No interruptions. No notes. Just eyes locked on hers, like he was listening to the spaces between her sentences. "I don't have polish," she added. "But I'm relentless. I make things simple. I make things work." The pause after her words stretched longer than it should have. Alice stared at the table. Her palms were sweaty again. Her stomach tried to fold in on itself. Then she heard 2 soft taps. Nicholas leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "At least you're not pretending," he said simply. "That's rare." He stood. So did she, too fast. Her chair groaned loudly in protest. Nicholas didn't extend his hand. He didn't need to. "Welcome to NewGen," he said. Alice blinked. "Wait, seriously?" He turned to leave, pausing just long enough to add over his shoulder, "Oh, and the car window forgives you." The door closed behind him. Alice stood frozen, trying to remember how her legs worked. She'd expected rejection. Maybe a polite brush-off. Definitely not. This, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, her real self was actually enough. By the next morning she'd be the girl who adjusted her bra in front of the CEO's car. And someone, no one quite knew who, would call her Miss Lettuce. It would spread like spilled coffee. Annoying, sticky, impossible to ignore, but also strangely fitting. Because Alice Park had just planted herself in the middle of a place where she didn't belong. And like it or not, she was about to grow. Alice's first official day at NewGen started with hope, caffeine, and a stain on her blouse she didn't notice until it was too late to change. The elevator ride up was quiet, except for the background hum of whispered curiosity. People glanced at her, then looked away a second too late. By the time she reached her desk, The damage was done. Someone had posted about it on the company's Slack. A casual mention of the girl from the elevator story. Within hours, it had evolved into a nickname. Miss Lettuce. Alice didn't need to ask how it started. She knew. The interview. The car window. The moment she adjusted her bra like she was home alone. And, to top it off, the damn piece of romaine stuck in her teeth during the final handshake. She smiled through it. Or tried to. In the break room, someone asked if she wanted a salad. Another offered her gum, just in case. It wasn't cruel, not really, but it stuck. She could have let it ruin her. Shrink into her chair, say as little as possible, keep her head down until the contract ended. Instead, Alice leaned in. Not into the lettuce jokes, but into the work. She stayed late, asked questions no one else wanted to admit they didn't understand. She volunteered for the impossible tasks, the ones that had been sitting untouched because they were messy, unclear, or politically sensitive. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just trying to survive. But slowly, the jokes started to shift. People still called her Miss Lettuce, but now they asked her for input, for ideas, for clarity. Then came the Monday meeting. A full room. Managers, developers, even 2 board members flown in from LA. The topic was the company's new interface, a sleek design no one could figure out how to explain to the average user. Tension filled the air like a static charge. Half the team argued for using industry jargon. The other half wanted bold, flashy buzzwords. It was a mess. And then, from the back of the room, Alice raised her hand. When Nicholas nodded, she stood. "I think we're making this too complicated," she said. "People don't want to feel dumb when they use something. They want to feel like they already know how." She took a breath. "It should feel like making instant noodles. Open the packet, pour hot water, wait 3 minutes. Done." There was silence. Not the bad kind, the kind that happens when something cuts through the noise. Then someone laughed, then another. Nicholas didn't laugh. But he looked at her, eyes steady, and gave a single nod. "That's the pitch," he said. No one interrupted. No one objected. They just accepted it. Later that week, the team sent out the first round of marketing with the headline, "Tech so simple, even your noodles would be jealous." Alice walked past a desk the next morning and saw someone had taped a post-it to their monitor. It read, "WWWMLD, what would Miss Lettuce do?" The nickname hadn't vanished. But now it meant something else. It meant clarity. It meant guts. It meant someone who wasn't afraid to say, "I don't know," and then figure it out anyway. And for the first time since the car window incident, Alice Park let herself smile about it. Because maybe being Miss Lettuce wasn't a curse. Maybe it was the start of something far better than cool. Something real. It started with a pale blue envelope wedged into the bottom of her apartment door. No knock. No ring. Just that soft, barely there sound of paper brushing against tile as it slid inside. Alice bent down, picked it up, and stood there for a long moment before opening it, already knowing what it would say. You don't need to tear open a letter like that when life has already taught you how eviction notices read. Final notice. 7 days, typed in all caps, bold and merciless. There was no apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement that her rent had only been 3 days late. Just a date, a deadline, and an address to return the keys. She stood in the middle of her apartment, bare feet pressing into cold linoleum, and looked around. The tiny space hadn't changed, but now everything in it suddenly felt temporary. The lamp in the corner she bought for $5 at Goodwill. The mattress on the floor with no bed frame. The fridge that buzzed too loudly at night like it had dreams of becoming a generator. She folded the paper neatly, too neatly, and slid it into the back of her underwear drawer, beneath the socks with no matches and a receipt she hadn't had the heart to throw away. No tears came. Not that day. Alice had long since learned that crying didn't fix broken leases. And it certainly didn't give you a new zip code. The next morning she put on her best attempt at confident office casual, a blazer from a thrift rack and shoes she had to glue last week, and walked into New Gen as if the rug beneath her life hadn't just been pulled. She smiled in the elevator, answered emails like she wasn't Googling homeless shelters during lunch breaks, listened to jokes about Miss Lettuce without flinching, even threw in a few herself. It was survival, camouflaged as charisma. But Nicholas Avery, her CEO, the man who rarely smiled and almost never spoke more than necessary, noticed. He didn't let on. He didn't stare. He didn't even ask. Until the third day. He passed her desk mid-morning. Didn't slow down. Just said, with that calm, unreadable tone of his, "Come to my office. Now's fine." She froze for a second, unsure if he meant her. But he didn't look back. Just kept walking. His office was the polar opposite of hers. Quiet, sleek. Not a paper out of place, not even a coffee mug. Just clean lines, soft lighting, and the faint smell of leather and focus. He didn't sit. Didn't ask her to. He just opened a drawer, pulled out a small white envelope, and held it toward her. Her arms stayed at her sides. "What is that? There's a program," he said, "for employees who need help, quiet help." She looked at the envelope like it was a weapon. "I'm fine," she said, too quickly. He didn't argue, just set the envelope on the edge of the desk. "It's not charity," he added, tone flat but oddly gentle. "It's what the company is for. Not just growth, but keeping people standing when life tries to knock them over." "I didn't ask for help. I know. I don't want to owe anyone anything. You won't." She looked at him then. Really looked. No judgment, no pity. Just a man standing very still, very steady, offering her something she hadn't realized she missed. Room to be human. "I borrowed money once," she said, the words slipping out quieter than she meant. "From a friend. She never let me forget it." Nicholas didn't blink. "Then don't think of this as money. Think of it as someone who believes in your trajectory and doesn't want you sleeping in your car before you hit your stride." Her lip twitched. "You make that sound way more poetic than it is." He gave the faintest shrug. "I don't do poetic, but I do practical." Silence sat between them. Not uncomfortable, just weighty, like a choice was hanging in the air, and neither wanted to be the first to breathe it in. Finally, Alice stepped forward, took the envelope, didn't open it, just held it with both hands like it might vanish if she squeezed too hard. "You're not failing," Nicholas said softly as she turned to leave. "You're just in a rough patch. Everyone hits one. Some just hide it better." She nodded once, eyes fixed on the floor. "Thank you," she said, so quietly it barely counted. "Don't thank me. Just keep going." She stepped out of the office with the envelope still clutched in both hands, walked past desks, past chatter, past people who had no idea what she carried. Not just in her hands, but in her pride. She didn't cry on the elevator ride down, not even in the bathroom stall after. But that night, back in her apartment, she stood by the window with the city lights flickering below, and finally allowed herself a breath that went all the way in. She still didn't know where she'd be living next week, but for the first time in a very long time. She didn't feel like she'd be facing it alone. The hotel in Chicago was nothing special. Modern, polished, forgettable. The kind of place designed to look like luxury but feel like nowhere. But that night, to Alice Park, it felt like the center of the universe. She had just walked off a stage that wasn't really a stage, just a branded platform with a too bright spotlight and a crowd of tech investors who didn't blink often. But they had listened. To her, and more than that, they had clapped. She hadn't worn heels, hadn't used big words. She'd just stood there next to charts and buzzwords and said, "Most people are afraid of apps because no one wants to feel stupid. Make it simple, like boiling water for instant noodles. Step 1, open. Step 2, stir. Step 3, done." Laughter had followed. Then nods. Then a firm handshake from a man in a gray suit who normally didn't shake hands. Nicholas had been standing at the edge of the room, arms folded, expression unreadable. But he had nodded once. Just once. And for Alice it was enough to feel like she had moved the sky a fraction closer. The presentation ended. The crowd scattered. Dinners were arranged. Champagne poured somewhere. Alice, not quite ready to return to her silent room, stepped into the elevator to clear her head. Then, just before the doors closed, a hand slid between them. Nicholas stepped in. The air shifted. He didn't speak, just pressed the button for the 20th floor and stood beside her, arms at his sides, eyes straight ahead. The soft hum of the elevator filled the space between them. Polite, mechanical, but beneath it, something else. Something quiet and taut, like an invisible wire pulled too tight. They said nothing. Not because there was nothing to say, but because too many things were waiting behind it. Then, suddenly, a jolt. The elevator lurched to a stop. Lights flickered once, twice, and then dimmed. Silence. Alice's breath caught before she even realized it. Nicholas glanced up at the blinking panel. No floor number, no movement. She swallowed. Okay, not ideal. His voice came low, like a thought spoken aloud. Scenes like this usually end in a kiss. She turned her head. Slowly, not startled, not offended, just caught. Their eyes met. And in that moment, every joke, every awkward beginning, every guarded glance in office hallways rose to the surface like bubbles in still water. He didn't move right away, just looked at her, deeply, plainly, as if memorizing a version of her he hadn't let himself see before. Then he stepped forward. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to notice the way her breath shifted. Close enough for his cologne to reach her. Crisp, faintly herbal, expensive in a quiet way. Alice didn't speak, didn't flinch, but something in her chest was trembling, like a note held too long on a piano string. Then, without warning, the lights blinked back to life. The elevator gave a polite ding, and the floor number lit up. Nicholas didn't move. Neither did she. And then, with a single breath, Alice broke the spell. "Thanks, universe," she murmured. "You really know how to kill a moment." Nicholas smiled. A real one this time. Small. Crooked. Infuriatingly calm. But his eyes said something else. Something that hovered just behind the smile. The doors opened. He stepped out first, turning his head slightly as he did. "Good night, Miss Park." She stepped out behind him. Same hallway, same carpet. But the air between them had changed, charged now with something unspoken. Not yet, but soon. She walked to her room without looking back. But in the silence of the hallway, the sound of their almost moment lingered. Soft, suspended. Waiting. Back at the office, the air had changed. It wasn't anything Alice could touch or point to, but it was there, lingering like perfume someone else wore. Conversation slowed when she walked in. Smiles held just a second too long. And the glances? They said everything words didn't. The rumor had spread. Quick, quiet, and fueled entirely by imagination. Two people. One elevator. A long pause. No proof, no photos, just whispers, and the assumption that where there's silence, there must be something to hide. Nicholas, as always, gave nothing away. He remained calm, professional, courteous. But something had shifted. The warmth in his voice when he used to say her name? Gone. Replaced by neutral tones and deliberate space. Alice kept her distance, too. They passed in hallways like strangers who used to know each other. A glance, a nod, nothing more. It wasn't cruel. It was careful. Like they were trying not to make any sudden movements that could crack what little was left unbroken. And then came the gala, the annual year-end celebration, held at a hotel dressed in gold light and soft music. Chandeliers, champagne, polished shoes, and the quiet pressure to look like you belonged. Alice wasn't planning to go, but Emily from HR had insisted, actually shoved a garment bag into her arms and said, "Don't let office gossip be the final chapter." So she showed up, in a borrowed navy dress that didn't quite fit, and a pair of heels she hadn't worn since college. Her makeup was minimal, but her posture was brave. She smiled, she laughed, she danced once, maybe twice, pretending not to feel every glance as a weight. And then her heel snapped. It happened in the middle of a step, sudden, sharp. She wobbled, caught herself before she fell, and limped off the floor like nothing happened. Behind the velvet curtain, in a quiet corner meant for caterers and extra chairs, she sat down, holding her broken heel like it had personally betrayed her. Her chest burned, not from pain, but from the sting of humiliation. It was always something. Lettuce, elevators, shoes. She didn't hear him approach. "Are you okay?" The voice was soft. Not firm, not formal. Just a man asking a question. She looked up. Nicholas stood there, not as a CEO, but as someone who had noticed her disappear and followed. Alice lifted the heel in her hand and gave a dry laugh. "I think I've officially become a walking metaphor." He stepped closer, but didn't push. "Then let's dance," he said. "Right here, where no one's watching." She hesitated. "I'm going to wobble." "I'll match you," he said. And she believed him. She took his hand. No music in this hidden space. Just the faint hum of Ella Fitzgerald floating in from beyond the curtain. They didn't really dance, just moved slowly, swaying, her socked foot barely lifting, his steps small to stay in rhythm with her imbalance. Her fingers rested on his shoulder. His hand stayed at her waist. They didn't speak, but something passed between them anyway. Something quieter than words, stronger than eye contact. She looked up. He was already watching her, and for the first time in weeks, there was no calculation, no distance, just presence. "You know," she whispered, voice low and raw, "when I tripped for a second, I felt like I had no one." Nicholas didn't look away. "You do now." They didn't kiss, they didn't make promises, but in that moment the silence between them changed, no longer full of doubt, just full of possibility. It had been a few quiet days since the gala, the kind of quiet that wasn't empty, but full of glances exchanged and thoughts left unsaid. Alice kept her head down at work, though her mind, now and then, wandered, back to the way Nicholas had held her that night, not tightly, but gently, like he knew she might need to pull away, and was willing to let her go if she did. He didn't text, he didn't call, he sent an email, a simple subject line. "Coffee?" "Just coffee." Alice opened it twice before replying. 3 words. "Only if it's warm." That Saturday, they met at a small, quiet cafe tucked into a side street where the city's noise softened into the sound of clinking spoons and low conversation. No suits, no titles. Just Nicholas in a navy sweater and Alice in an old jacket she didn't bother to iron. She liked that it wrinkled easily. It reminded her of herself. He was already waiting when she arrived, stirring a cup of coffee that had gone cold but untouched. When she sat down, he didn't greet her with a smile, not right away. He looked at her the way people look at things they're afraid to want too much. "I've been thinking about you," he said quietly. "Every morning. Every time I see a cup of coffee I forgot to drink." Alice's heart stumbled. Not in a dramatic way, just in that soft, unexpected way hearts do when they've been waiting longer than they realized. She looked down at her hands, then up at him. "I tried not to feel anything," she whispered. "I told myself to stay focused, be smart, don't get involved." A pause. "But every time you looked at me, I forgot what I was trying not to feel." Nicholas didn't say anything at first. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object, wrapped in tissue paper. He unwrapped it slowly, placed it on the table between them. A keychain. Silver. Shaped like a tiny mirror, and on the back, engraved in neat block letters. Warning. May contain lettuce and feelings. Alice let out a laugh that sounded more like a gasp. Then she covered her mouth. Then she wiped her eyes. "You kept the joke?" she said, voice thick. "I liked the truth in it," he replied. "You made a mess. You didn't run. And somewhere between all that awkward honesty, I stopped seeing you as someone who worked for me." Alice looked at the keychain again. It was ridiculous. Sweet, utterly unnecessary, and exactly right. "I don't need the elevator to stop this time," she said, smiling through her tears. Nicholas looked at her. "Then maybe we can just walk forward, together. However far this thing takes us." She nodded. Not because she was sure, but because she finally wanted to find out. The lake was so still, it looked like glass, silvered by dusk, kissed faintly by the last blush of sun. The wooden cabin stood just beyond the trees, quiet, small, filled with the scent of pine and something simmering on the stove. But Alice wasn't inside. She was sitting at the edge of the dock, her shoes off, feet dangling above the water. Her hair was up, but a few strands had rebelled, curling softly around her cheeks. She didn't mind. The wind was gentle here, the kind that knew how to respect a woman's thoughts. Out in the water, a small rowboat moved without sound. Nicholas was the one rowing, though barely. The oars barely touched the surface. He let the current carry him most of the way. When he reached her, he didn't speak, just extended a hand. She climbed in without question. They floated. No phones, no audience, just the hush of lake water and a sky that kept getting deeper and deeper in color, like it was exhaling after a long day. Nicholas reached into the pocket of his coat. Yes, he wore a coat on a boat, and pulled out a small square box. He didn't open it right away. "I don't have a speech," he said softly. "I don't have a grand metaphor or a string quartet hiding in the trees." Alice smiled, blinking slowly. She didn't need a speech. "But I do know this," he continued. "My life used to be complicated, controlled, like a machine with too many moving parts. But somehow you made it simple." He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Not massive, not flashy. A modest gold band with a small green stone. An emerald, soft and deep. "I think," he said, his voice lower now, "you might be the update I didn't know I needed." Alice laughed once, a quick sound, and covered her mouth with both hands. Then she nodded. Tears clung to her lashes like morning dew. "And you," she said, "are the stable version I never thought would run on my system." They didn't kiss right away. That wasn't their style. They sat in the boat a while longer. Let the moment breathe. Weeks later, they were married. Not in a cathedral, not under chandeliers, but on a sun-warmed stretch of sand, where friends stood barefoot and laughter came easy. The ceremony was short. The chairs didn't match. The music was just someone's cousin with a guitar and too much heart. Alice walked down the aisle barefoot, wearing a simple white dress and no veil. In her hands wasn't a bouquet of roses, but, true to form, a head of crisp green lettuce. Someone had tossed it her way just for fun. She caught it, decided it felt right. Nicholas met her at the altar, hands steady, heart open. When the officiant asked if he had any final words before the vows, he leaned in close, his voice just loud enough for her to hear. "You're still Miss Lettuce," he whispered. She tilted her head, eyes warm with mischief. "But now," he smiled, "you're mine." And just like that, the girl who once fixed her bra in front of a stranger's car window married the man inside it. Not with perfection, but with truth. The afternoon light spilled into the kitchen, golden and quiet, the way it does when time itself decides to slow down. Outside, the trees whispered their own secrets in the wind. Inside, everything was still, except for the kettle gently rumbling on the stove, and the sound of two hearts, steady but waiting. Alice stood by the counter, barefoot, a soft sweatshirt draped over her shoulders. Her hands, always full of gestures and nervous energy, now held a small, neatly wrapped package. Nicholas walked in, loosening his tie like it was instinct. The air between them didn't buzz. It hummed. Familiar. Comfortable. Home. She handed him the box without a word. He raised a brow, gently undoing the twine. No occasion, no holiday. Just a quiet Tuesday. Inside was a simple t-shirt folded tight. Gray cotton, soft to the touch. Across the chest, 3 embroidered words. Dad in training. For a second, Nicholas didn't move. His fingers stopped. His breath, too. Then his eyes lifted to hers. More question than reaction, as if needing to hear it aloud, even though he already knew. "Is this—" His voice didn't crack, but it softened, like a man catching a glimpse of something fragile and sacred. Alice nodded. 2 months, she whispered. Heartbeat strong. Doctor says everything's good. She tried to say more, but the tears reached her first. Not loud, not dramatic, just full. Full of years survived, jokes made, elevators paused, exalach tossed in wedding aisles. Nicholas didn't rush toward her. He stepped slowly, closed the distance like one would cross a threshold into something holy. He wrapped his arms around her, and she sank into him. No music, no big speeches, just the low whistle of the kettle and the steady rhythm of 2 people standing still together. His lips brushed the top of her hair. "You're still Miss Lettuce," he murmured. She laughed against his chest, hand resting gently over the place where new life had begun. "But now," he added, his voice quieter still, "you're everything." There was no need to say what came next. No need to plan the future that was already unfolding, heartbeat by heartbeat. The kitchen, warm, worn, lived in, held them in that moment like a photograph that would never fade. And if you listened closely, you could almost hear it, the first tiny thump of a new heart, whispering, "Home." Love doesn't always begin with perfect timing. Sometimes it starts with a clumsy moment by a car window, a shared smile in an elevator, or an unfortunate piece of lettuce. But it's those little mistakes that can lead 2 strangers to something deeper, something lasting. Now it's your turn to share. On a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate today's story? Have you ever met someone in an unexpected way, and they ended up changing your life? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. We read every single one. Your story might be just what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please consider sharing it with someone who might need a smile, a reminder, or maybe their own Miss Lettuce moment. And if you enjoy honest, heartfelt stories like this one, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter.